Right, Brickers, let's go through everything in the wiring harness and talk about what's good, what's bad, what's missing, what we've got extra, and maybe what we need to do to have the harness in a position where it'll run the engine. So we've got the ECU mounted, we've run the harness through, and we've plugged in a few things. I bought a MAXXECU race, and then I bought the MAXXECU T5 pre-terminated harness. So it's a harness that's made to run the Volvo 5-cylinder T5 engine. Obviously here we're working with the T6 engine, and they do sell the T5 harness if you were doing a T6 build. So they will even include the extra coil pack and injector plug, for example. So it is expensive. I think it was about 800 quid or something. And it is, you know, they do say you can make it work for the T6 engine. It's not super close. I mean, there's the basic things are there, but there's a lot of things I'm going to have to change and add to make it work with my particular engine. Again, there's different T6 engines, there's different T5 engines, so there's so many different variations of each. Getting like the T5 harness to just work with a T6 and just add a coil pack and an injector is pretty unlikely anyway. You know, I was prepared to have to add things in. Anyway, right, what's good? So first of all, 5 coil pack plugs, they all plug in as expected, obviously. The only thing is that, and they do state this before you buy it, they use the VAG coils, the Audi, Volkswagen. You've seen people use the Audi R8 coils. I've used the shorter Volkswagen coil packs, and they just plug straight in. So it's not, they don't plug into the Volvo coil packs. So I had to get some Audi coil packs, Audi, Volkswagen, VAG group, whatever you want to call it. 5 injectors, 5 injector plugs. They just work with standard ones. I've upgraded to 660cc injectors, I think. So the injector plugs, just your standard universal Bosch ones, I think it is. They just plugged in fine. Intake camshaft sensor at the back of the head, that plugged straight in. The exhaust camshaft sensor at the back of the head, that plugs straight in. That's all good. Variable valve timing. So the variable valve timing, which I have for the intake and the exhaust, both of those plug straight in, and they're at the front of the head. And the lambda sensor, which is, you know, your aftermarket standard wideband. I've got 2 now. I've got an AEM one, which I was using before, and I've got a new one as well, which came with the MAXXECU kit. I can use either. And that's about it, really. So on to what's wrong. Firstly, the coolant temperature sensor. So standard on most T5 engines, and I think the NA 6-cylinder, the thermostat is on the coolant, the rad hose. So it's kind of linked into where the rad hose goes into the engine from the radiator, from the top of the radiator. Mine on this T6 engine, it's actually on the front of the engine. So it's like behind the engine cover, in between the 2 camshaft sprockets, is kind of in the middle there. So it's a bit of a strange one, but it means with the thermostat being there, the coolant temperature sensor wire comes out and in between the 2 camshaft sprockets and goes in to where all the coil packs are on the engine. So it's a bit of a strange one, but firstly, that means that I need a longer wire, and secondly, the actual plugs, the connectors, I've got 2 of the same on each end. They're both female connectors and they don't go together. So I'm going to need, I think, to make the wire longer and to have put a male connector on the wire. Secondly, that's wrong, is the crank trigger. So the crankshaft like trigger, the position that reads the flywheel, so that's at the back of the engine. That has the wrong plug on it because I decided to use the crank sensor from my NA engine because mainly I'm using the same flywheel, and I didn't want to use like the T6 sensor and have it not work with my old flywheel that I was using. So I just thought, well, if I keep the same flywheel, the same crank sensor, I know there isn't going to be an issue there with clearance or it reading it correctly or whatnot. So I've just got to put a different connector on there. That's more my doing. Next one is the throttle position sensor. It's got the wrong plug on it, so I'm gonna have to change the plug or just wire it myself. Obviously I am going e-throttle. This is a whole other issue that I've got. There's 6 wires normally coming out of the e-throttle. I'm not sure which pedal I'm going to use, and that'll dictate how it works, whether there's just 2 analog signals and a digital one. I'll probably be doing a whole separate video on the e-throttle situation. But basically the MAXXECU race is great for that, because the MAXXECU race accommodates for e-throttle. So that's great. There's even some guidance on it as well. Essentially I need to decide which pedal I'm going to use. I could use a Volvo one. I could use, I've got them here actually. I've got I think this is from the 2004 XC90 T6, which is what the engine's from. So that was the first one. You can see there's a plug there with 6 wires. And I also bought one again with 6 wires, a V70 2000 V70 right-hand drive manual. They're both made by Hella. Somebody recommended this. I can't remember who it was, but thanks for that. Not sure why I'm using that, but if somebody recommends something, I'll generally go ahead and pull the trigger on it. So I've got 2 pedals. I could use another aftermarket one which has a simpler system without the digital reading. So yeah, there is the whole e-throttle situation, but the throttle position sensor itself, the plug that comes from my pre-made harness, does not go into my throttle body. So I need to change the plug or wire it separately, whatever. Next one is the boost valve. I bought a boost valve from Speed & Parts, obviously, like pretty much the whole build's from Speed & Parts at this point. The plug that I got with the T5 harness is different, so I might have an option of buying a Volvo boost valve, a Volvo T5 boost valve, and just having that plug in. So that could be an option. Also, there's whether I'm going to do electronic boost control at all. I may do, but at the moment my turbo is running a 1 bar spring in it. 1 bar might be too much. I really want to just go to about 8 to 10 psi and hope I've got north of 300 horsepower. So I'm not sure what I want to do. I think I need to get a softer spring in my wastegate and then use the boost valve to control the boost electronically, rather than having it just run 1 bar. So I need to reduce the boost in the wastegate and then have the electric, the ECU like up the boost from the low point, because you can't have the wastegate running 1 bar and then reduce it with a boost valve. You can only increase the boost. So I need to finesse that whole situation as well. But anyway, boost valve, I haven't got the correct connector. Right, on to what's missing. First of all, the obvious stuff. We've got 1 coil pack and 1 injector, both missing. Well, the plugs came with the harness, but it's like wires I've got to add in, if you see what I mean. So I've got to add in the wire for an extra coil pack and the wire for an extra injector. Next is fuel pressure. So there's no fuel pressure sensor or plug with the T5 harness. So that's something that I've just got to add in. I've got my fuel pressure sensor, which I got from Speed & Parts, and it's connected, it's screwed into my fuel pressure regulator, which is also from Speed & Parts and is actually Speed & Parts branded. That's a really nice piece. That's all sorted. The fuel system's all locked off now, so that's great. Next one is oil. So there's oil temperature and there's oil pressure. So there's 2 there. However, I got a fancy sensor. I think it's a Bosch one from Speed & Parts, obviously. And that is screwed. It's 1 sensor and it does both temperature and pressure. So that's really cool. It's plugged into, it's screwed into the sandwich plate. Oh, have I got that here? Yes, I have. Oh, it's even here. Look at that. That's the sensor I'm talking about. Everything seems to be just handy at the moment. That's great. This is a sandwich plate for the oil cooler. So I've got the AN10 lines to go through here to the oil cooler, and that's my combined oil temperature and pressure sensor. So that'll do both just with one plug. I've got a connector for that. I think it came with this. I've just got to wire it, send the wire to the ECU. So that's another one. I still need. What else is missing? Yeah, e-throttle. I've already talked about that. I need to just wire that up. That's fine. And also, what's missing from the T5 pre-terminated harness, which I was kind of expecting, was knock sensors. So there's no wires or sensors, wires or plugs coming out of, like, included in the harness. So I've got to do the wires, the plugs, and buy 2 knock sensors, which was, I wasn't expecting to get the sensors, but I was expecting the wires and the plugs to be there. I've got 2 knock sensors already on the engine, but I'm going to buy new ones because they're just old. So yeah, knock sensors, very important. That's something else that I've got to add in. In terms of extra that's in the harness that I might not use or might use. Firstly, there's the idle air control valve. The idle air control valve I'm not using because of the e-throttle. I should be able to just not use an idle air control valve. So the ECU will essentially control the idle. And the other one is the intake air temperature sensor. I would like to use that, so I think I'm going to find a way to have that inside the inlet manifold, because you want it after the intercooler, you know, on the way into the engine. Just to monitor. It's just another good thing to monitor. I've got to wire up the main things with the alternator and starter motor, but the wires are there. I've just got to decide where everything's going, and plug that into the ECU and stuff. So there's like the whole, like the main power feed for the ECU and the engine, which I've just got to sort out, which is kind of linked into the battery relocation situation. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So there's a lot like wrong, like incorrect, and a lot missing, but overall, like, so far I'm still quite happy with everything I've got from MAXXECU. I mean, I bought the pack I can even make my whole harness from scratch if I wanted to. I mean, I've already got my T5 pre-terminated harness plugged into the engine. See, I've got all of this. So I've got enough to make a whole harness from scratch if I want. So I've got like 2 harnesses essentially. So I've got loads of spare wires, and I've got all the plugs I need, but I've got lots of wires, and all the information I've had from MAXXECU so far has been great. I'm excited to like download the software and start playing with that, and just plug it into the ECU and download. Also, like, crazily, one of the great things, like, MAXXECU is Swedish, I believe. Someone might correct us on that if they're not Swedish, but I think they're Swedish. If you go on their website and look at all of the bass tunes to just download onto your ECU, it's all like, you know, the hero cars, your R34 Skylines, your Supras, RX-7s, like all of the JZ stuff, all of the RB stuff, SR20s, you know, all the usual stuff that us drifters absolutely love. And then at the bottom, there's just like T6 with 1000cc injectors. So I was like, wow, it's got all these like the hero cars, and then there's like a Volvo T6 at the bottom. So I've actually got a base map to download from MAXXECU website onto my ECU. So I'm using smaller injectors. I mean, it's not going to be as simple as this. There's so much you've got to do, you know, tuning the e-throttle and like all the things. But basically, when it comes to the tuning side, I've got a base map there. So that, I mean, that's a huge win. So I'm expecting to just like download this from the MAXXECU website, change the injector size from 1000cc, or scale it down to 660cc, or scale up the fueling, because you go for a higher percentage with smaller injectors, and then just like turn the key and it'll just fire up. It won't do that, but you know what I mean. I mean, having a base map, a base tune there just to download is awesome. Yeah, so I think that's it. by my reckoning, I think I've got about 12 or so wires, not including like the e-throttle. 10 to 12 like wires and plugs I might need to run. So with 10 to 12, I'm thinking, because I've got the main harness, as you've seen, running through the bulkhead, and I can't really like add to it. It's extremely difficult to run a wire into that main harness. So what I think I'm going to do is run a sub harness with all of the extra stuff that I haven't got already, and then change a few plugs around that are wrong, and pretty much jobs are good. And like, I wasn't actually expecting to ramble for over 15 minutes there, so I think I'm going to just make this a separate YouTube video. In that case, this is likely an outro. So thanks very much for listening to all that, Brickers. Let us know what you think about the whole MAXXECU situation. I know I've got a bit of a list of stuff to do to add to a harness that was like already expensive, but I think it's very doable. I think it's still a very usable thing where the pre-terminated harness has kind of got us 80% of the way there, I suppose. And I've just got a few extra ones to add. I mean, in terms of the quality, every single little thing on the whole engine, see it? Injector, every little thing is labelled. The quality is amazing. See, that's my boost valve. You know, I could just, every single wire, you know, this, what's this one here? Coolant temp, throttle position sensor, idle valve. You know, even like these tiny little red ones, I don't know if you'll be able to see on there. It says alternator on them, like so. Not only the like the connectors labelled, all the wires are as well. Really glad I've gone for MAXXECU, because I mean, this isn't meant to be a sales pitch for MAXXECU or anything, but like, you've got all your connectors there, and this is just like one piece of paper, but it's like really useful. And then the one on the other side that talks about all like the e-throttle stuff and how to make it work. And then you've got like a quick start guide as well, and then you've got all of the support online, and there's so much on the website. You know, you've got like everything that you get with the MAXXECU race. This quick start guide's really good as well, just tells you like loads of basic stuff. For me, like, I'm not experienced with wiring. I think it's the one thing that I probably haven't done in all my years. I haven't really done, I've never like done an aftermarket ECU before. I've never even done an engine swap. There's so many firsts for me with this build. Yeah, I've learned a lot over the years, but this is new to us, and I think this is like the support that seems to be available for all the MAXXECU stuff, and just how well it's been put together. I think making a whole harness from scratch might have been a bit beyond us at this point, so I'm glad that like this pre-terminated T5 harness has been a bit of a cushion for us to get us like most of the way there, and I can just add a few little wires. So I think it's I think it was still like a really good idea to go with the T5 harness. And yeah, very impressed with the quality of MAXXECU so far, so excited to push on and get it running. Also, there's one other thing. Obviously, like you know, I've got the T6 960, but I've also got a Volvo 340 outside with a red block engine, and you know, this whole harness here, if I don't use it for my T6 build because I got the pre-terminated one, I've got like pretty much a whole extra harness here that I can make into a working harness for the 340 build once I've got the T5 running. I'm calling it T5 now, once I've got the T6 running. So that could save a load of money, and everything I'm learning on this car I'm going to put into the 340 once I've got it running. Obviously, like, sorry, cut you off there. Obviously, I'm going to be focused on drifting and a lot of stuff and vlogs and things with the T6 once it's done. Hopefully in the next like month or so I'm going to be out drifting. But after that, the 340 outside, I need to push on with it, you know. So that's going to be the next big project. And as you might have seen on my Instagram and stuff, the 340 is pretty special. It's quite a nice, clean, rust-free shell. The red block itself is not red. I've powder coated it chrome. and the head and the turbo and all the engine mounts. Had the engine bay painted. It's super slick and smooth and very pretty. The first stages with that, I should probably get into that in another video. But basically I need the engine to be machined and to accept the bigger pistons, and then we'll start building the engine up. But yeah, in terms of, we're talking about the harness here. This harness here, you know, I could, well, it's not a harness, it's just loads of wires, but like they're all labelled as well, you know, so I can use that as the starter for my harness for the red block build. Anyway, Breakers, thanks for sticking about and listening to me talking for 20 minutes. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next one. Peace.